Hey guys, it's Thursday. Mad. Mad, that's what they call me. It's true that I am nervous, very dreadfully nervous. But why do they say that I am mad? The fever I had last year just sharpened my senses, not destroyed them. Above all, my sense of hearing became the sharpest of my senses. I heard things in heaven and on earth. I even heard many things in hell. How then am I mad? Listen, you will see how calmly I tell you the whole story. It is impossible to say just how the idea came to me, but once it entered my brain, it haunted me day and night. There was really no reason for the deed I had in mind. A murder. I loved the old man. I rented lodging in his home. He had never wronged me. He had never insulted me. Yes, he had gold, but that I had no desire for it. I think it was his eye. Yes, it was his eye that disturbed me. You see, one of his eyes was normal, but the other resembled the eye of a vulture. It was a pale blue with a film over it. Whenever the eye looked at me, it made my blood run cold. And so, very gradually, after much thought, I made up my mind. I would kill the old man, and then I would be rid of the eye forever. You do think I am mad, but madmen are disorganized. They cannot plan anything. But you should have seen me. You should have seen how wisely and carefully I plotted and planned every step. And you should have seen how cunningly I went to work. Never was I kinder to the old man than during the whole week before I killed him. Every night about midnight I turned the latch of his door and opened it. Oh, so gently. And then, when it was open, just wide enough for my head to fit in, I reached a dark lantern into the room. The lantern was all closed so that no light shone through. Then I thrust in my head. I moved slowly, very slowly, so that I would not disturb the old man's sleep. It took me an hour to place my whole head far enough inside the doorway to see him as he lay upon the bed. Would a madman have been so careful? Then, when my head was well into the room, I opened the lantern cautiously. I opened it so cautiously that only a single ray of light shone through and fell upon the vulture eye. Just a single ray. And this I did for 7 long nights, every night just at midnight. But every night I found the eye closed, so it was impossible to do my work. For you see, it was not the old man who angered me, but his evil eye. Every morning, for 7 mornings, when the day broke, I boldly went into his room and spoke to him. I called him by name in a hearty voice and asked how he had spent the night. So you see, he would have been a very suspicious old man indeed, if he had imagined that every night, just at 12, I had looked upon him while he slept. On the 8th night, I was even more cautious than usual at opening the door. The minute hand of a watch moved more quickly than my hand did. Not until that night did I feel the extent of my own power. To think that there I was, opening the door, little by little, and he did not even dream my secret deeds or thoughts. I could scarcely contain my feeling of triumph. I laughed to myself at the idea. Perhaps he heard me, for he moved from the bed suddenly, as if something startled him. Now you may think that I drew back, but no. His room was completely black, in total darkness, for he had always kept the shutters closed out of fear of robbers. I knew that he could not see the opening of the door, so I kept pushing it slowly, steadily inward. Finally I had my head in. I was just about to open the lantern when my thumb slipped on the tin fastening. The old man sprang up in the bed. "Who's there?" he cried out. I kept quite still and said nothing. For a whole hour I did not move a muscle. Yet in that time I did not hear him lie down. He was still sitting up in bed listening, just as I had been doing night after night. Listening to the death watches in the wall, those tiny little beetles who beat their heads against the woodwork making a ticking noise. These ticking noises are said to predict death. How right those predictions would be this time. Soon I heard a slight groan. I could tell it was not a groan of pain or grief. Oh no. I knew it was the groan of mortal terror. It was the low, muffled sound that comes from the very bottom of a man's soul. I knew the sound well, Many a night just at midnight, when all the world slept, and that very same groan had come from within my own soul, deepening the terrors that I felt. I say I knew the sound well. I knew what the old man was feeling, and I pitied him. Although I laughed again to myself, I knew he had been sitting there awake ever since the first slight noise when he had sat up in bed. His fears had been growing upon ever since. He must have been trying to imagine them away, but he could not. He must have been saying to himself, "It's nothing but the wind in the chimney," or "It's only a mouse crossing the floor," or "It is merely a cricket which made a single chirp." Yes, he was trying to reassure himself with these comforting ideas, but they were all in vain. All in vain, because death, with his black shadow before him, was approaching, and it was the shadow of death that caused the old man to feel, although neither see nor hear, to feel the presence of my head within his room. I waited a long time, very patiently, without hearing him lie down, so I decided to open the slit of the lantern, just a little. You cannot imagine how silently, how stealthily I opened it until a single dim ray came out of the opening and fell upon his eye, his vulture eye. The eye was open, wide, wide open. I grew furious as I gazed upon it. I saw it distinctly, all a blue and with a hideous veil over it. It chilled the very marrow in my bones. I could see nothing else of the old man's face or body, because I directed the lantern's ray precisely on the vulture eye. I had said it before that what people mistake for madness is really an exceptional sharpness of my senses. And now my sense of hearing was at its sharpest. There came to my ears a low, dull, quick sound, a sound that might come from a watch that was wrapped in cotton. I knew that sound well, too. It was the beating of the old man's heart. The beating increased my fury, just as the beating of a drum increases the courage of a soldier. But still I remained motionless, scarcely breathing. I held the lantern without moving. I tried to see how steadily I could keep the ray upon the vulture eye. Meanwhile the hellish beating of the old man's heart increased. Every instant it grew quicker and quicker, louder and louder. The old man's terror must have been extreme. The beating grew louder, I say, louder at every moment. And now, at the dead hour of night, and amid the dreadful silence of the old house, this strange noise excited me to uncontrollable terror. I have said before that I am nervous, so I am. Yet for some minutes longer I stood quiet, still. But the beating grew louder, louder. I thought the old man's heart would surely burst. And now a new terror seized me. Would the sound grow so loud to be heard by a neighbor? Without delaying another moment, I had made my decision. The old man's hour had come. With a loud yell, I threw open all the slits of the lantern and leapt into the room. He shrieked once, only once. In an instant, I pulled him to the floor and dragged the heavy mattress over him. I smiled joyously, for the deed was done. But for many minutes the heart beat on, with a muffled sound. This, however, did not bother me. I knew it would not be heard through the wall. Finally, the beating stopped. The old man was dead. I moved the mattress away and examined the corpse. Yes, he was stone. Stone dead. I placed my hand upon his heart and held it there for many minutes. There was no beat. He was certainly stone dead. His eye would trouble me no more. If you are still thinking that I am mad, you will not think so any more. Not when I describe the wise precautions I took to conceal the body. I pried up 3 planks from the floor of the room and placed the corpse under the boards, in the space between the floor and the lower story of the house. Then I replaced the floor planks carefully, so that no human eye, not even his, could have detected anything wrong. I put the mattress back on the bed and made it up to appear as if no one had slept in it. The night was nearly over. I worked hastily, but in silence. By the time I was done, it was 4 o'clock, but still dark as midnight. As the church bells sounded the hour, there came a knocking at the street door. With a light heart, I went down and opened it. For what had I now to fear? 3 men stood there. They introduced themselves with great politeness as police officers. A shriek was heard by a neighbor during the night, one of them explained. This neighbor suspected foul play and had come to the police office. We were sent to search the building. I smiled at them, for what had I to fear? Come in, I welcomed the officers. A shriek, oh dear. I'm sorry if anyone was disturbed. It was myself. A dream, you know. A nightmare. I'm all right now. Thus talking, I led my visitors through the house. The old man? Away, you know. Gone to rest in the country for a few days, but come and see for yourself. I took my visitors all over the house. I told them to search well. Finally, I led them to his room. I showed them his treasures, secure and undisturbed. Full of confidence, I brought chairs into the room and told the officers to rest here after their labor. I myself was feeling so bold because of my perfect triumph that I placed my own seat upon the very spot of the floor under which the old man rested. I was amazingly at ease. The officers were satisfied. My manner had so convinced them of my story that they sat and chatted of familiar things, and I answered cheerfully. But after a while, I began to wish they would go. My head ached, and I thought I was hearing a ringing noise in my ear. Still they chatted. The ringing in my ear continued and became more distinct. To get rid of the ringing, I talked more freely, but the ringing continued and got louder and louder, until at last I realized that the noise was not in my ears. What could I do? I grew very pale, but I talked even more freely and in a louder voice. Yet the sound increased. It was a low, dull, quick sound. A sound that might have come from a watch that was wrapped in cotton. I gasped for breath, and yet it seemed the officers heard nothing. I talked more quickly, more loudly, but the noise increased steadily. I stood up and argued about an unimportant matter, argued in a high-pitched voice and with violent gestures. But the noise steadily increased. Why wouldn't the officers leave? I paced the floor, to and fro, with heavy strides, pretending to be excited to a fury by the unimportant matter we had been discussing. But the noise steadily increased. Oh God, what could I do? I foamed, I raved, I swore. I picked up the chair upon which I had been sitting and swung it about so as it grated upon the floorboards. But the noise of the chair grating upon the floorboards was drowned out by the other noise. It was continually increasing. It grew louder, louder, louder. And still the man chatted pleasantly. Still the men smiled. Was it possible they heard nothing? Almighty God, no, they heard. They suspected. They knew. They were making a mockery of my horror. It was what I had thought at the time, and it is what I still think today. But oh, my agony. Anything would be better than this agony. Anything would be easier to bear than their mockery. I couldn't stand for their mocking smiles any longer. I felt I had to scream or die. The noise came again. Listen. Louder. 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 Villains! I shrieked at the police officers. Do not pretend to me any longer. Do not mock me any more. I admit everything. Tear the planks. Here. Here. It is the beating of his hideous heart. Happy Halloween, everyone. I'll see you next Thursday.